And I want to preface some of this for everybody to think about the contextualization for the region in which you live, right? For the culture in which you work. Because I do think there's a lot of nuance in, say, what might work in a Philadelphia corporate setting and what might be applied in, say, some of the places that people have represented themselves here today. So if we think about the regional contextualization about leadership and we sort of parking lot that for a moment, I do think there's some sort of tried and true principles that resonate decade over decade. I would encourage people to think about the leaders that you've worked for before, the good and the bad. What was it about their leadership style that either you wanted to adopt yourself or you knew you would never do yourself if you were actually in a leadership position later in your career? And it's interesting to think about the character, the traits of character, the virtues of character that are attractive to the people around you. I think one of the things, Vic, that I've seen sort of transform in leadership acumen for the more successful leaders today that might have been different, say, in the late 1980s, is that the ability to inspire people to do things they otherwise would not do on behalf of the organization's vision and mission and fundamental ideals is something that I think is a little bit new, and some leaders have this ability to inspire for the right reasons, right? It's not through coercion or intimidation, right? Or threat of expulsion and termination that get you to do a thing or get you to stay late. You're actually inspired to do more because you want to do right, because you believe in the organization for which you work. You believe in the leader for which is guiding you and setting the strategy. And I think that's really something that we've started to see come through in our MBA program right here on Wharton's campus. And it's something that our faculty bring forward every day. Like, what tactics and what techniques can you apply to inspire the people that are in your charge, right? There's also, we think about too, mindful care. We start to think about the responsibilities we have to our people that work for our organization. And you can think about that in ripples of a pond, right? Is the people that work for you also probably have families, right? Maybe they have kids, maybe they have an elder parent or family member that they have to care for also. What's your responsibility to the people in your organization rather than what's their responsibility to you? And I think that reversal of inspiration is really inspiring. And it's one that I've been observing quite clearly in our new Vice Dean, Patty Williams, who herself is a marketing expert. She has that leadership style, and it makes it fun and exciting for me to come to work every day, even though our jobs might be really hard, right? And that helps with sustaining your workforce and also retention. I think that's another big challenge that a lot of the people out there today are probably facing, right? Like, how do you retain your top talent and how you keep them there and able to do even greater things? I have encouraged students before to think about not just the leaders today, because I want to address this question, but what are the historical leaders of yesterday that still resonate? Why do they resonate? What about their story? What about their leadership profile still seems to be impactful today? What can we take from that? I think that's pretty straightforward, but I also think it's a little bit different depending on who you are, what your skills are naturally, and what organization and sector you work in, not to mention what region. There are plenty of leaders here in the United States that a lot of our, say, like elementary school students will call upon. They read about them in their textbook. Why do we read about them? Internationally, in the places that you might be, who are regional leaders that people still talk about, right? Are still on the tips of our tongues, that still get read about in textbooks. What did they do that still resonates? I think the other part, we start to discover unsavory things about successful leaders in the past. What was discovered since then that is now unsavory, and what would you not want to duplicate, right? Sometimes I think it's a little harsh to levy criticism on someone by the social norms of today, but it's still a helpful lesson on who we want to be and how we want to be. Here's a helpful exercise. I want people to think about dilemmas that they encounter in their profession. Considering the decision that you choose and asking the question, what does that say about me? That's not selfish, it's self-reflective. Like, can you live with the decision that you have made? When people reflect upon why you did the thing that you did, do you feel okay with that, right? Is that emblematic of your professional character, your leadership character, and what you stand for? I encourage students all the time when we talk about leadership ethics. What do you stand for? Why do you stand for it? It's really easy to say, hey, I agree with B or A or C or D. It's a much harder thing to articulate why it is you believe in that thing. So I'd encourage people to try that exercise. Try to talk about what are the particular values and principles that you stand for and why you stand for. So Vic, I've actually done a little bit of research about this. I think people can embark on training and development that allows them to lead teams, but I also think it is a misguided view of business that to advance is to lead people. To advance is to have even more headcount under your charge. I think for businesses, and actually this is more advice for leaders out there than the folks that might not be. I think we have to accept that some people are at their best as individual performers. And you can give them tasks and you can continue to promote them, but maybe promotion doesn't mean they're supposed to supervise people. Maybe it means they're supposed to get greater responsibility over the work that they do, and they can be great, shining individual performers, and that could be the best that's for your business. I think it's a challenging thing when we think, well, we need to promote Vic, right? He's been knocking it out of the park in all these projects, so we're gonna give him 5 people, right? Maybe it's on the same team that he was like you were currently on, and that also creates a challenge, right? If any of us have ever been promoted from a team of peers for which we were coworkers, that's a really challenging thing. For someone that's been in that setting, it's a very passive approach to introductory leadership because people don't necessarily recognize your authority right off the bat, and that can be really hard. I think businesses need to better understand the need for individual performers that are best set in that kind of vertical, and to really support them in their journey and keep them around as top talent. If anybody's ever watched a video of a presentation they've given, or maybe they spoke at a conference and gave a large, right, like board presentation, it's always painful to watch it back, right? I feel like some people hear the recording of your own voice. Rarely does everybody like the way they sound, like the way they look, right? It's a challenging thing if people are actually open to the feedback. To me, that's the biggest challenge. Some people just don't want to know. Others will say they want to know, but they'll turn it off, right? They'll mute the feedback. I think the willingness of a leader to accept the fact that they may not be the source of everything that is true and real in that business setting, that also has the courage to know when it's appropriate to follow people that are actually on their team and put them out front, because it's actually to the betterment of the team, the betterment of the organization, the betterment of professional development, is when you have somebody that actually doesn't necessarily who gets the credit, but wants to do the best work. 360 reviews are something that I've taken part in, and they can be tough, right? You're gonna hear things that you probably otherwise don't wanna hear because it's criticism about you as an individual and you as a leader. And if you've been getting steadily promoted in your career and getting good annual reviews, you probably have a vision of yourself that's very elevated and complimentary, right? To pop that balloon is to something to like, oh boy, right? To take a step back and really reassess your own skills and how people think of you and think, you know, if you weren't there, maybe they could do it so much better, is really a difficult thing to be open to receiving. So I think the biggest challenge that I see is the resistance to receiving that feedback and actually having the opportunity to become better and reflect on that. Deflection or the attempt to blame other people will not produce secondary success, right? Allow you to recover. Taking our medicine is perhaps one of the hardest things to do. Why so many people try to avoid doing it, but it is a clear demonstration of leadership skill and acumen for somebody that can raise their hand and say, I made a mistake, right? That was me. I won't make it again. I'll do better. I think the other challenge too, Vic, I just want to talk briefly about from a leadership perspective is when you give decision-making authority to someone on your team and a mistake is made, you also need to stand up and take the criticism that comes from that mistake. You don't get to deflect and say, well, you know, it was my people, they didn't do a good job. That is something that also alienates the people that report to you. It'll erode trust, and it may get them dusting off their resume because they want to try to work for another leader, somebody else that might protect them and stand by them in a tough time. So I would give that advice to everybody out there as they think about, when the lights are bright and the microphone is on, how large the crisis might be, to not let one crisis become another, become a second or a third or a fourth, where it's a waterfall and you just drown because you can't get out of it. Take your medicine and then. So you need the support. I think what we've done at the Wharton School quite frequently, and I've participated a little bit of this in my own career, is professional coaching. And we think professional coaching can be done in a variety of ways. So you want to see like what's the intended outcome that we're seeking. But I think to bring in some external coaches, you give them enough time, right? Like 1-2 hour session is not going to cut it. But you have several meetings over several months and you start to assess particular capabilities and maybe some certain weaknesses. And you figure out, are these things that we want to address with professional development? Another thing I've also seen be really effective is the promotion of people into leadership positions that are given lieutenant style support for the leadership elements of the team dynamic. Right, so maybe you're a great visionary, a great strategist, but you need, say, an immediate direct report like a number 2 that's going to help to build team culture, right, and nurture the people that are under your charge. That's another way that it's worked, but that's typically more prevalent in big organizations, big companies. Some of this depends on relationships. If you have a relationship that's strong enough with either your direct supervisor or a leader at the organization, to candidly ask them what you need to do and what sort of performance you need to demonstrate that will put you in a position to move up. It is very possible, though, that you may not have that relationship or you might not feel comfortable asking that question. And if that's the case, think about your own network. If it's people that you've gone to school with previously, colleagues that you've had before that know your work style well enough to give you constructive criticism and feedback on what you might try. I think one of the hard things, and I'll just talk from my own professional experience, is the degree of value employers do or do not put on diversity of experience. As I think many of us know now, this idea where our parents may have worked in a singular place for 3 decades or 4 decades and then retired and maybe had a pension or some other benefit is not the norm anymore, right? I forget what the newest research suggests, but I think it's that we're going to change jobs, if not careers, 7, 8, 9 times over in the course of our professional career, which means you may transition to other places. Your current employer may put more value on diversity of experience of a similar applicant that might have similar skills that you do. And if that's the case, then you may need to diversify that resume. One other way to do it is the desire for continuous lifelong learning. I want to salute you for just taking the time to join us here today, if not to actually enroll in this program, because it demonstrates how serious you are about your own professional development and your desire to do well, right? And to continue to advance in your career. I think completing programs like this, where you can put on your resume and share with your employer, I took a leadership program at the Wharton School, right? Like, this is something that now you will be able to say, and not just say it, but bring the skills to bear that come along with the program. I think that's another technique that's very effective and something that I strongly recommend folks here today consider. Two things, because I really like this question. The first is we need to demystify. We, as human beings, we have a tendency to make people their office. Where I don't say, hey, how do I talk to Vic? I say, like, how do I talk to the president? How do I talk to the CEO? Not how do I talk to this human being who just happens to have different roles and responsibilities in the organizational hierarchy than I do. If you have been granted an interview, it is because the people that are on that hiring committee see true value in what you can bring to their organization. Take comfort in that. Walk into that session with confidence because you know they've already recognized that about you, right? And then just tell them your story. I think the other part too, I wanted to kind of turn the coin over a little bit to the question was, there is a real desire for people naturally to network up, and people don't want to network down. I actually have great criticism with that. One, as someone that may be in a bit more of a senior leadership role, sometimes we can become insulated from what's happening on the ground. And often when feedback starts to filter up at each level, a little bit gets taken out. And that's often from the natural tendency that people don't want to communicate bad news up the food chain in an organizational hierarchy. And what that does is it actually removes a senior leader's ability to make truly informed decisions. So for anybody out there, when you go to a company like you only want to network up, I don't mind that. That's a fine thing to do, but don't hesitate to also network down and across, all right? Expanding your network in all directions will only help you. Ins and ends with our faculty, Vic. And I think one way to demonstrate this is just the sheer volume of the research and intellectual expertise that come to bear at the Wharton School. We have more faculty than any other business school in the world. I'm not exactly sure of the precise count, but I know it's more than 220. So when we talk about the research power, the consulting power that is happening at any business school, nowhere is it more profound than at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's something that we're really proud of. There are strengths when you think of any business school out there that you can name from like the Magnificent Seven, right? The MITs of the world, the Harvards of the world, Stanford, I mean, we could go on and on. They do not have the scale of faculty doing the amount of research and consulting that we do. And I think that intellectual expertise comes to bear in classes like this. And that to me is what really sets it apart. Having worked at another business school in the region, it is always the huge shadow that is cast over the entire Northeast is by the Wharton School. And now being able to be a part of that and bring this education to people all across the world is incredibly exciting. It's something we take a lot of pride in here as Wharton Online team. And another reason we were excited to partner with an organization like UpCred. I think it holds different value for different profiles. I think the one thing I would offer is often the skills that made you successful in the job that you got promoted, right? Like you did really well in a position that ultimately earned you promotion will not be the same skills that you need to be successful in that next job. So you might be in the C-suite. How you got there might require something different in the future to be successful in this new job. So I think the ability to recognize we always need to be upskilling, we always need to be refining our skills, sharpening our skills, is something that makes it necessary for us to not get complacent. Like, hey, I made it, right? I'm in the corner suite, I nailed it, I'm gonna be fine, I'm going to be super successful in this, just because I've been successful before, I think would be a real miscalculation on what you need to do to continuously grow. I noticed Hamad put a question in the chat about upgrading and developing our skills. When it comes to leadership, I would encourage everybody, what's been incredibly helpful for me in my own career is building a network external of my organization. What company do we compete with? What companies do we compete with? Reaching out to those folks, right? You go to conferences, right? You go to networking events, social events. Reach out. The people that are doing similar jobs that you were doing at your own organization, reach out to them and talk. It's incredibly reassuring sometimes to know that the challenges that you are facing, you're not alone. A lot of people are facing those same challenges. Maybe they faced them a little bit earlier. What did they do? How did they handle it? You're going to probably find a community of people that like the idea that they can speak freely about the challenges of our work. And rather than just see ourselves as, hey, I've got to beat you, it's how can we help each other? It can be really helpful about continuing to refine leadership skills and to continue to grow. Plus, as you talked about, Vic, your last question, moving up and maybe you're a little bit stunted, when you've built that network, when jobs open at other organizations, maybe that's an opportunity to call out a favor. Like, hey, we've talked, we know each other pretty well. This may be the biggest group of heavy hitters on the Wharton faculty side I have seen in a singular academic program. You probably subscribe potentially to Adam Grant's podcast or his TED Talk series, or you follow him or have read his books. The world's preeminent organizational psychologist, right? I think that he bears no introduction. and he teaches in this program. He's a New York Times bestselling author of multiple books, named one of the world's 10 most influential management thinkers in Fortune's 40 Under 40. It's difficult to look anywhere in this space and not see his name in bright lights. So we're very excited that he's part of this program. Peter Capelli's, I'm a bit biased, he's kind of my favorite. He is an incredible public speaker. He's an incredible thinker. And he does a lot in the area of human resources. I was at a conference in Florida a few months back, and I had asked him to come down and do a presentation for the conference at Gartner. He's doing Reimagining HR. All the attendees, and we're talking about a couple thousand, are CHROs, right? Chief Human Resource Officers and folks that are in that learning and development space for Fortune 500, 1,050 companies. And people kept coming up to me and saying, oh, I'm such a fan of Professor Capelli, right? And we were handing out books. It was standing room only, and everybody had a great time just hearing about all of his research that comes to leading teams in a time of COVID, now a time of remote work, and how you support people that may not be sharing office space with you on a day-to-day basis. Really fascinating, really compelling information. Nikolai Siglikau is part of this program. He is now the Vice Dean of our MBA program. I think a lot of you probably know the Wharton School for its MBA program. You are getting the head of the MBA program at the Wharton School teaching in this program. I know Catherine Klein is also teaching in this program. Now, Catherine's really impressive in her own right. She's consulted and done work for Charles Schwab, Roman Haas, Medtronic, PenBet, the U.S. Census Bureau, Korean Management Association. You see folks also, I think it's important to say like where they're consulting and where they've worked. I didn't mention like Peter Capelli's done work across the world. I mean, he was in Spain, he was in Bahrain, advising the government. So these are people that are not just teaching in classrooms or doing research at a computer. I mean, these are folks that are traveling internationally to share their expertise with foreign governments, with multinational corporations. And somebody else that I wanted to also talk briefly about is Professor Nancy Rothbard. She's the Deputy Dean. She is our Dean, Erica James, #2 leader. And she is, I mean, maybe one of the most authoritative voices in leadership in the world, not to mention running the Wharton School. So I think it's important to note that this program we've developed with UpGrad was not about bringing TAs or postdocs, right, or some adjuncts or senior lecturers. You are getting the preeminent faculty at the Wharton School teaching in this program. To me, that's really exciting, and I think emblematic of why we're so excited about bringing this program to you and talking about it. I think real quickly too, if you'll forgive me, I should talk a little bit about why we partnered with UpGrad. Now, UpGrad's co-founder, Ronnie Scrivala, says, I think pretty wisely in the program brochure that this program helps senior leaders across different industries really take their leadership skills to another level. When we talked about our mandate as Wharton Online to bring the Wharton School and Wharton executive education to people in places that maybe have not had it before, UpGrad helps us do that. UpGrad helps us expand our reach to reach even more people, like those of you I see joining from many different places: Oman, Vietnam, Zimbabwe, the UK, and many more. And that's exciting to us. I think the more people that have access to high-level education, the better things we can do in this world together. And that's sort of a journey that I think we all take together, and it's one that we're really proud to take part in and to partner with all of you and our colleagues at UpGrad. Vic, this is I'll say fun, really. One of the funnest parts about working in executive education at the Wharton School, and not in, say, an undergraduate setting, or even in the MBA program, frankly, is there is learning that happens peer-to-peer within the cohort, not just from the faculty member. The way executive education has been described to me at the Wharton School is that we have a responsibility to set a table. On one side of the table, are the leading academic research and consulting minds of the world today. And on the other side of the table are business leaders from various settings, various regions across the world on the other side of that table. And they exchange in conversation and strategy and talking about what's working in their own settings and what they're seeing in the academic community. And it is that conversation at that table that allows both sides to do things they otherwise couldn't do before. And to me, that's the really exciting part about programs like this that set that table and bring those people together so they can learn from. Perhaps one of the more valuable parts of this program is being able to represent that to the external community and marketplace, not just to your own employer, that you did this thing. You did it here at the Wharton School, and you should be proud about that.